Likewise. How is everybody doing? Oh, can you hear me now? Yes. Awesome. That means my audio is back working, maybe? Yes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Hazel. Hi, Deanna. Hi, Monica. Hi, Claire. How is everybody doing? Nicole, it looks like you're at I'm guessing like a brunch, bar, lunch kind of thing.
Ooh, this is
Nice. Hopefully you're doing something fun or coming back from doing something fun.
we were at a beer fest.
Oh, fun. Good, good, good. Excellent. Well, happy book club Sunday, everyone.
Thank
Monica, I think this
you.
is your first book club Sunday, so welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes, we are thrilled to have you. Monica stopped by our booth at the LA Times Festival of Books, where we got to chat with her a little bit. So it's great to see you again virtually this time.
I've
Yes,
enjoyed your comments through the month when reading it. It's been fun.
absolutely, absolutely. Hi, Claire. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm tired. I
Oh,
have a
I know.
toddler, so he's
Oh.
constantly, I don't know if you have any experience with toddlers, but dear Lord, I'm so this is my first one, so man, it's humbling. It's very humbling.
How old is your toddler, if you don't mind us asking?
He's 2 and 2 months,
Oh,
so
I
yeah, he's
understand.
in it. We're in it. Yeah.
I'm sending you some good vibes over there and
Thank
hoping
you.
hopefully things calm down a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We, as you can probably tell, we are a pretty informal bunch, but we are thrilled to be talking about what happened to Ruthy Ramirez today. This is our book club pick for May. We are doing this in June because last week fell on obviously the holiday weekend, so we have moved it to this week. So I again thank you so much for joining us. I want to kind of jump right in. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about kind of what maybe your first. Obviously, I'm Antoinette. Sorry, I didn't do that. I'm Antoinette. We've been
Oh,
kind of corresponding over email and over Instagram a little
yeah.
bit. Um, but I am the host here, and so we have obviously all the other book club participants. Everybody jump in as you see fit, or you can put questions. There's a chat over there that you can put questions in, however you feel like engaging. Totally fine. But I was hoping maybe Claire, we can jump in a little bit about and tell us maybe what's your first memory you have of either reading a book or a book being read to you. What's the first thing that you remember?
Oh man, I remember being in kindergarten and copying the first page of like a book that was like Once Upon a Time and just being blown away that I had like so proud. So from a very early age I loved books and I loved the act of reading and writing and I'm trying to think of the first books I know. I There's one where it's like, oh god, and I'm blanking out on the name. There's like a green blob that's on the cover, and it eats the cafeteria ladies, and the kids are trying to like figure out how to save the school from the green blob, and then finally it ends with this. They get this one kid who like loves to eat, and he eats the green blob, and I was just like, I loved this book so much. I thought it was. As a little kid, I thought that was, this was it. I also read like a lot of, just in elementary school, middle school, a lot of
Mhm.
R.L. Stein,
Yeah.
Fear Street books and the dollar joke books from Scholastic because those were the cheapest to buy. They were like 99 cents. And now I think about it and I wonder sometimes if that's kind of helped shape my sensibilities as a writer. Like I love jokes. I love also like thrill and surprise and mystery and those were the books that those were the first books that I was reading.
Yeah, excellent. So did you do the Scholastic, it sounds like you did the Scholastic Book Club Fair too at your school, right? Where you could go in, you could buy books, or you could get points where you could use them
Yeah.
towards books.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. And it's I mean, it was the Scholastic Book Fair could be very expensive sometimes. So
yeah,
I remember looking like being like strategic, like you would want like, oh, I want that $8 book, but that would be, in the 90s, that would be like what that's like what, $15 in the
yes.
90s. It's like that's not happening because I they gave me $4, right? Like so
Yep.
I got to figure it out. And so I remember those fairs. It was very, like I have very fond memories of them, and then also libraries. I loved
Mhm.
libraries.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate that my mother would bring me to them, and so I just thought the idea that like you could take books for free,
Mhm.
any books, that was great.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Well, it sounds like that shaped at least your love of reading. So we're
Yes,
happy to sort of hear the
absolutely.
origin. It's always interesting to see when people started to really get into books and then how maybe that
Mhm,
shaped their, sort of the trajectory, right? So
mhm.
can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into writing? I'm always in awe of authors general. I mean, it just the fact that you can take an idea, start writing it down and then actually get it published out into the world and have other people reading it and interpret it and enjoying it is just that's a huge feat. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of what your journey was to becoming an author.
I always loved writing. Like, I mentioned before as a kindergartner, like the magic of writing those words once upon a time. And I loved diaries and
Mhm.
journals. I loved a beautiful journal, right? Like, I would be excited just to write in it, right?
Yeah.
And so
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to ask, did you ever get the ones with the locks on the side and
that's
you
right.
could
I
lock
had
it up
one with
so
the
nobody could
lock.
read it?
Yes, I have one with the lock that, my parents found a way to open because my parents are my parents. But yeah, I had a one with the lock. I loved like, pictures. I had even the ones that were like, you could draw into, I just always I was always writing and I was always reading. And I don't think I ever thought to myself, oh, I can be a writer. Like even up until college, I mentioned this before in another interview. I thought, okay, I'm gonna be a teacher, because it being a writer, even getting into an MFA program was like, oh, that's not gonna, like that, like I'm gonna write, but I'm not sure that that's gonna shake out the way I think it's gonna shake out, where I'm gonna be a writer who sold a book and will continue to sell books and make a living off of that, because that's so rare. And so I feel incredibly fortunate that it's happened. And, it was a lot of mentors who took time. So I always think about that and always want to return the favor too to folks who are, especially young folks, um, providing resources and, sharing everything I know.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Well, like I said, we're here to talk about what happened to Ruthy Ramirez today. So I want to maybe sort of jump right in. I'm curious to know. There's so many different layers to this book that I really enjoy. But first, I'd love to know what was your inspiration. How was Ruthy and her family, born? Where'd you get the idea for it?
I was thinking there's two um, there's two moments. First, I was thinking about disappearance, right? I was thinking about sisterhood. I was thinking about the violences we inherit from colonialism, racism, these things, right? Migration and displacement.
Mhm,
And so I was messing around with that. And then I was also thinking about popular culture, TV,
mhm,
um, reality TV specifically. I've mentioned this before, but I was really, interested in the ways in which Black and Brown women's bodies become these sites of violence in
mhm,
reality TV, but it becomes spectacle. It's like for entertainment, right?
mhm,
And so I am, and but at the same time, that as a young woman in my 20s, that was what I was watching, right? Like I was
mhm.
binging these shows, right?
Yep.
And so thinking about that inconsistency in myself, right? Like
Mhm,
what is this? Why why was I watching this TV that at the same time to was so like at times was, just point blank despicable, right? Like in the especially reality TV of the early, of the aughts, right? And so I had this moment where I was watching a show and I thought, oh my God, I think that person went to school with me, and I was trying to figure out, is it this person, and I'm looking through. And then at the same time, I was working on this story. And so those two,
Wow.
I brought these two things together because I thought to myself, here's what if a family, who lost somebody they loved was watching TV and saw us and they were like, that's her, that's Ruthie,
Mhm.
right? What would
Mhm.
they do? And so that really kind of gave the story some fuel and some momentum,
Mhm.
and that's sort of how it came to be.
Excellent. Well, it is a multi-layered book. I mean, I think there's so much we can jump into, but because you've sort of started with the reality TV spin on it, so we've got an app where we kind of talk through and have kind of group text as we're reading the book. And
Oh,
one of the
that's so
questions
cool.
we talked about was, yeah, we have a good time. One of the questions we talked about was like this reality TV component. Like, if you watch it, what do you think about it? Are you here for it? Do you think it's great? And I love that you were talking a little bit more about, yes, it's certainly exploits people, but I watch it. I think it's a
Yeah,
phenomenon because it's huge, right? A
yeah.
lot of people watch reality TV. And so it's finding that balance of like, am I helping to perpetuate these stereotypes? But it's also very entertaining. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love your take just a little bit more about how you hope this book will maybe help start those conversations, or maybe kind of what putting that in the book meant for you.
Even beyond reality TV, what I was thinking about is like, when do we see ourselves? When do we see our stories? When do we see, ourselves reflected in the movies and films in ways that are real and not uh, exploitative, or stereotypical, and so that question, um, I was juxtaposing it next to this other question of, Ruthie, um, Ruthie has disappeared, but the coverage of Ruthie's disappearance doesn't exist because there's this idea of, this girl probably just ran away, or this isn't and so for me, that was real because what we see on TV, what we see around us shapes how other people see us, and whether or not they pursue, for example, like, let's find this girl. And so those are the things I was really thinking about. I don't think reality TV has to be always exploitative, right? Like, I think it could be. I mean, look at documentaries, they could, when handled right, that they can be really powerful and beautiful. And so I think that it's just pushing, like being a critical viewer, like, yeah, watching and be like, this is ridiculous, but when can it be good? When can this open up things for us? There's this moment inside the book where I think it's Jessica, one of the sisters, is watching the show and she's like, why can I stop watching? And
Mhm.
she talks about, like, well, sometimes when, all day long you see, people are treating you wrong and telling you what to do. Sometimes you want to see that rage enacted, women actually expressing their anger, right?
Mhm.
And so I also think that there's that, you know making great reality TV doesn't mean that, like, everybody is, like Pollyanna, right?
Mhm.
But it means that we're it's not getting curated or manufactured. Uh, like, the drama is not manufactured; that it's authentic and real. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But I agree. I think you're right. Obviously, there are documentaries, and then other sort of kind of what we call reality TV that doesn't have to be, down that same route of being very stereotypical. So
That's right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this family. We've got the two sisters, we've got Nina and Jessica, and then we've got mom and dad. And I thought it was interesting the way you started the book, right? So from right off the jump, it was like she's missing, the family's torn apart.
Mm.
And very early on, we find the dad is passed away. The mom is not doing great from a health perspective, and then the two sisters sort of are figuring it out. I'm curious how what was your motivation for kind of starting the book that way, right? Because sometimes you'll see the book kind of starts off with not really the ending, but sort of, it gives you a lot of detail and then it backtracks and said, this is how we got here. What was
Mhm.
your thought process in kind of starting it off? Because then you already kind of know, like, wow, things weren't great after Ruthie disappeared, and sort of, what that journey looked like.
Oh man, and for some of you all who are also writers in addition to readers, you know that you go through so many different drafts. I mean, like the structure, I've tried out every single structure in this novel. Man, I had it going backwards at one point. Like it started the future, went backwards.
Oh, wow.
I had at one point Ruthie sections all at the end as one part. I mean, I've switched. At one point I had a wall where I had index cards and I would switch the index cards had the chapters, chapter one, so and so, chapter two, so and so says this, and then I would keep on switching it, switching it, switching it. And so I think that we finally landed on. It's interesting. The prologue was actually before a few pages in, as opposed to the first page.
Yeah.
And then I was speaking with my agent and working with her. She's like, I really think that this page should be first. I think it could set it up. And so, and I was kind of like, I don't know. But then I was like, oh, she was right. And sometimes it's, working with editors and agents who were editors. My agent was an editor for 20 years. Was very fortunate for that. Like sometimes having that outside eye helps you see the structure better, because when you're in it, it's like
Mhm.
you're like,
Mhm.
what is going on? It's like when you're in it, it's like you put a hand close to you, you can't really see the hand, and as you bring it further away, you're like, oh, those are fingers. And
Mhm.
so having the ability to work with other people to help you see the structure, that really helped. I think that one big change that happened once it was acquired, my wonderful editor Seema Mahanian had worked with me, and initially it started off with the sisters finding watching TV and seeing her,
Wow.
right?
Mhm.
And she's like, Claire, I kind of want to go back to that moment where she goes missing, because I want us to see, what it
Mhm.
was like that day, so that we feel that impact, right? So that we
Mhm.
feel what these women went through. And again,
Mhm.
I was like, well, I don't know. Like you get like a bit, and then I wrote the pages, and she was absolutely right. I was just talking to somebody about this, to two other writers last night, Ana Reyes and Katie Gutierrez, and we were
Mhm.
talking about how, like, sometimes your editors really see things you don't. And so I wrote those first pages because we wanted to see um, Ruthie,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Before we saw the grown up sisters, and
Mhm.
I think it was a good choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm curious how, as you talked a little bit about kind of the editing process. Can you walk through, because I don't know that it's necessarily apparent what that looks like, right? If in your experience, if there are a lot of revisions, if it's more high level, if you go back and forth and say, oh, pull this out or add this or change this or make it longer or shorter. So can you walk us maybe just a little bit about what that editing process was like for you?
Yeah, every author, it's different, and it usually depends on if they're selling the whole manuscript or if it's on a partial. So we were talking about this last night. Sometimes you can sell a manuscript on 50 pages, and then you're actively working with your agent and editor to like develop the rest of the manuscript.
Okay.
And so there's like sort of this. In that case, that sort of developmental editing is much more hands-on. When I
Okay.
sold Ruthie, the book was already done. So, and I was, and which I think is how I kind of preferred to do it, because I want to know in my head as much of the story as possible, right?
Mhm.
Before get it to other folks. And the edits with Seema were um, minimal but necessary. Like again, like the biggest one was that beginning, and I think she nailed it. I think she really saw something that I had missed, and so. I was grateful for that. I try to think of other edits. Maybe we we added more reality TV scenes, right?
Oh,
And so like that was because I think that the idea was like building this parallel between these two stories, and seeing the drama of the reality TV show next to the drama of the sisters and kind of weaving it in this way, so that we see the sisters actively watching it. And that was a really great choice too. So
Mhm.
for my book specifically, editing was sort of like suggestion or minimal, but I think it can vary depending on whether or not you're selling on a partial or you're selling a complete novel.
Got it. Okay. And when you talked a little bit about the different characters, and in this book, you obviously jump through different narrators depending on the chapter. And we've had some other books in our book club that sort of does that. And some, some of the books will give you a whole lot from each character, some will give you just a little snippet. And
Yeah,
then so I always feel like that's a very interesting dynamic in figuring out how much to give, right?
yeah,
And when, and then when
absolutely.
to jump from this character to that character, but also keep the story moving along. So, can
Absolutely.
you maybe talk a little bit about how you make those determinations, right? I'm going to do Ruthie now, and I'm going to do Nina next, and I'm going to do Dolores, and then, how you weave those stories together, but also, again, keep the reader, keep the story moving along.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned before that, it was a lot of switching right around
Mhm.
the chapters. Because what I was looking for was the tension between, the end of that chapter and the beginning of the next, right? How might how might that ending and beginning echo? How does it rub against each other? What are questions that are being dropped inside of one chapter that are getting picked up in the next chapter? And so
Mhm.
you're also thinking of mystery, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I don't think of this as a like a, I know sometimes people are like, oh, it's a mystery, but I don't. Mysteries have their own genre expectations and beats that they have to hit. This is a more of like a literary novel that borrows from certain mystery conventions, and one which I think is such a cool trick is to think about, like, what are the questions that are being planted, and and how are we answering it throughout. And so that's how I started to think of the chapters, and also like this idea of call and response, right? Like, so
Mhm.
the daughter who's calling out almost, and then the mother comes next, and there's a response, right? And so
Mhm.
those were the guiding forces as I tried to figure out the structure.
Got it. Yeah, I really do like the way it was. You got the different perspectives, but as you're reading it, it wasn't confusing. It wasn't like, wait, where did we leave off, and who is this character again, and what does this have
Yeah.
to do with everything else? So I think, and I think that's a challenge, right? That's not an easy
Mhm.
thing to read to do to make sure that again you're recognizing you're able to pick right back up where
Yeah.
that particular character kind of left off.
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So I'd love to talk a little bit more. So we started off. We've got the cast of characters. So we've got Nina, who is graduated from college. She's made it back. She's back home. She hasn't been able to find a job, and so she's sort of working in local retail, which she does not love,
Mhm.
and really struggling. I think a little bit with her manager, the people around her, just the job in general, and doesn't really seem to enjoy that, right? She looks at it as though I've not been able to do what it is that I was going to go off to college and sort of do other things, and it seems to me doesn't feel like she's kind of fulfilled that.
Mhm.
What are you hoping to portray in Nina? What was sort of the, I guess, the narrative or kind of storyline that you were hoping to that she would represent?
I was really thinking about um, the testing the American dream, right?
Mm.
So at
Mhm.
the same time, this is happening in 2008. What do we have? We have, the Great Recession. We have, occupied Wall Street, right? Like,
Mhm.
Lehman Brothers has crashed, right? And you have this young Puerto Rican woman whose mother has migrated to New York City from PR,
Mhm.
and well, has the circular migration, going back and forth between PR and New York,
Mhm.
and chooses to raise her children inside of New York for, that story that is very common amongst immigrant and migrant folks, like, to have a better life, right?
Mhm.
And what happens? Dolores's daughter disappears, and Nina goes to college, does everything right, gets a scholarship, and graduates and can't find a job,
Mhm.
like,
Yep,
and is
yep.
working in the Staten Island Mall, and
Mhm,
and there's like this great injustice about it. She's like, I have a degree in
mhm,
biology. What's going on?
mhm.
And and so I thematically that was the question or the topic that I was trying to bring to the surface with her trajectory there.
Y Yeah, yeah. I could feel sort of the frustration through Nina, right, after saying, "I've went away to college," but also I wonder, I think it might have been Jessica, who mentioned this, but the thought was, "Hey, you left," right? So mom wasn't
Mm,
doing great, I'm sitting here, Jessica's sitting here
mhm,
being the one who's picking up the pieces, helping move things along,
absolutely.
and really painting Nina as as opposed to, you're going off to get your education to kind of better your life, but more like you're running away from the problems that are here and I'm being
That's
stuck with
right.
it. So,
That's
what
right.
about that dynamic between the sisters, right? There's always, siblings, there's always a very interesting dynamic. So, what about those two and how they play off of each other?
Oh yeah, definitely. I that's exactly what I was trying to that conflict was exactly what I was trying to bring forth in the book. Like
Okay.
the burden also of Jessica being the oldest and having to take on the sort of and also the weird guilt and shame that happens for folks who go away and
Mhm,
then come back. Oh, you think you're so smart now. Oh, you got a
mhm.
college degree, nobody can talk to you. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. Like sometimes it's just like, damn, you know I just studied Shakespeare. Like, why are you mad at me? Right? I did what you wanted. And so I wanted to pick that apart too, to think about like how that can how that builds tensions between these two sisters,
Mhm,
and also and the third thing that you mentioned about her running away, I think is very
mhm.
true. You
Yeah.
know, yes, she goes to yes, there it's true that she has this scholarship and that's wonderful and she's doing what she needs to do, but she's also running away from facing these really difficult issues and the consequences of this disappearance.
Yeah.
And Jessica has to take the weight, as
Mhm.
older sisters often have to do. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because we see Jessica, she's got a small child as well, right? So she's got the
Mhm.
small child, and then she's got her mom that she's kinda taking care of on the other
That's
side.
right.
So really kinda doing that double duty.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So while we're on the sisters, let's maybe jump into Ruthie a little bit. I was very intrigued by Ruthie's character. Every time there was a chapter on Ruthie, I was like, oh my gosh, what are the clues? What am I missing? What stuff is in here that's going to tell me what happened to her?
Mm,
Um, I would have loved more Ruthie. I really liked, but I liked that little bit, like that sort of mystery and suspense that was built
mm,
in. But man, I really liked her. I would have loved to have
yeah,
seen more of her on the pages.
yeah.
Um, Tell me about writing her, right? Because as you said, you kinda have to have some mystery there, right? Because that's a little bit part
Mhm,
of telling that story. So how do you find to
mhm.
tell a little bit without telling too much, right? How do you strike that balance?
So Ruthie, one of the things I was really thinking about is, and for because I'm assuming everybody's read it, like
Mhm.
she's a 13-year-old girl, right? And her life is cut short. And so I wanted her sections to be these brief moments, right? And I
Ah,
wanted to kind of go into the one day in the life of a 13-year-old girl,
yeah.
and just like to blow it by separating it, and first period, second period, yeah, third period, like
Mhm.
just blowing it up so that first day feels like forever, because it is forever for I think often I said this, I've said this before, but I think it's so true that when you become an adult, you look at 12 and 13-year-old kids and you're like, oh, you're a little kid, bro. Oh, you're mad about that, you're gonna be okay, don't worry, go over there. And it's like, but for when you're 13 and like your friend's not talking to you,
It
or
was like everything.
somebody says something about your jeans,
Yes.
I remember being a kid and like somebody being like, "Oh, those jeans are from Kmart. They're from Chick." I was like, "No, they're not." And I was like, "Damn, they are though." And like
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
haunted me in
Yep.
sixth grade. I was like, "Why do I have to have chick jeans?
Yep.
No." And
Yep.
like an adult would be like, "Who cares?" Right? But you feel it. Like
Yeah.
you feel that. And so I wanted to capture that with her section, and also to it's to cat to capture that longing, like
Mhm.
she's so brief inside the novel, but
Yeah.
she's so brief inside these women's lives,
Yeah.
And that is that to create that feeling of absence, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's Ruthie. But I loved
Yeah.
reading the parts. I did. I loved going back to, junior high school in 1990, looking up like all of the songs and
I love that there was so much as you talk about, and now it all makes sense as you talk about wanting to show it really through Ruthie's eyes. As you
yeah,
think about, she was saying like her friend wasn't talking to her and was talking with other girls and ignoring her. And as you get further in the book, there was a scene where she kind of looks back at, I think Yasina is her friend's
yes,
name, and
yeah,
says, "Man, I know I'm putting myself out there by like kind of making the first move or something, but man, I hope she looks back and kind of acknowledges me." And so I
yes,
really like that fact that this was her whole world, right? This was her whole
mhm,
world was what's happens at school, her track practice, what dynamic is going to happen between the two.
yeah,
And it makes sense, when you explain it that way, where it's her chapters are brief because really her life was cut short. It
mhm,
really sort of starts to make sense. So
yeah,
um, so let's talk about Dolores now. So we've gotten the girls. So let's talk about Dolores. She's big into the church.
yeah,
She also misses her daughter, terribly. She
mm,
seems to have I would say a strong relationship with her with Nina and Jessica.
yeah.
Tell me more about Dolores. Is she reminiscent of anybody that you know, or you've met, or what's her character, and what's kind of the background on how she came to be?
Dolores is a conglomeration of a lot of different women I know. She, I really, her part was also one that I struggled with the most,
Oh, okay.
mostly because I was thinking of, um, as somebody who grew up, I'm Puerto Rican, but of the diaspora. I was born and raised in New York,
Mhm,
and uh, Dolores's story is one of the circular migration where she,
mhm,
she grew up and also in Puerto Rico,
mhm,
so I wanted to be like really careful with her perspective and to really dig in and take my time with her to
mhm,
understand her. The
yeah,
other the other big the other big force at play, of course, is that she's a mother who's lost her daughter, right?
mhm,
And that amount of grief. And at that point, when I was writing Dolores's part, I
mhm,
hadn't had a child yet.
mhm,
Like when I was in I handed in the edits for the novel a day before I gave birth.
oh,
And
wow.
then after I gave birth, I asked, a few weeks, I said, see, I need more time
Mhm,
with the manuscript. Give it back to me. Give it back to me. And like,
mhm,
and she was like, okay, okay. Because I was like, man, Jessica's not tired enough. And also like, the absence, like that grief, like you have a kid and then you're like, damn, if this kid disappeared, I would be done.
yeah,
Like once
mhm,
you have it's just like, and it feels so much more forceful. And I really just wanted to return to Jessica and Dolores's parts
mhm,
more to really go through that. But even before I had the child, I knew that in thinking about Dolores's grief, that as a woman who was of faith, but who had lost her daughter, right,
mhm,
or whose daughter had disappeared,
yeah,
I pictured her parts always as this constant conversation with God, right? And a
mhm,
profane conversation with God, a
mhm,
profane prayer. And so I wanted her to be, at one point saying, Dear Lord, at every moment be like, Dear Lord, this, and then also fuck this, right? Like,
mhm,
and
mhm,
so I wanted both of those
mhm,
elements as part of her character and that felt
mhm,
true to me because I know women like that who are
yeah,
very, like, who go to church every day, so say, Lord this, Lord that, and then they're cursing out somebody, who's trying to cut them off, right? Like,
yes.
and so and so that's how I thought of Dolores's part, but it was a tricky one, and it took a lot of learning for me, to get her.
Yeah, I do. I like that you mentioned that because we talk a lot about she's in church and she's telling her children, you need to go to church, you need to do these things. And then the scene when she's with Yasina in the parenthood class and she just
Yeah,
goes off on her. I
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
I
Also,
really
like, also very familiar with women I've known, like, so it's like, um, yeah.
yeah. How much of this I'm wondering how much of this is sort of autobiographical or at least sort of picking up on some of the things and experiences you may have had that may have shown up in this book.
I think I write fiction, and when I think about characters, I often think about this Toni Cade Bambara introduction to her short stories, where she's like, people are like, "Well, is it real or not?" She's like, "No, I can't write real stuff because my mom's gonna snatch me up and be like, 'That's what you were doing after school.' I got you, So like,
Yeah.
I kind of I'm with characters, I kind of try to make sure that they don't look like too much like people in my life, whether
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
thematically, the things that are true, the questions of, colonialism,
Mhm.
race, violence, disappearance, those are things that I've experienced and feel, going to a PW, a predominantly white institution, like as a 18-year-old girl, like those are things I understand, right? And
Mhm.
so I it's you're going at the truths while also the players are different, right? But
Mhm.
those truths and the questions are true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about sort of colonialism, is it brought me back to the scene in the book where Nina is at the retail store, and she's being asked to speak Spanish to
Oh, yes.
one of the patrons, and she's like sitting there, and it's funny because in the book I could sort of see it going through her mind, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. How do I say some words? What are some words that I know that I can throw out here? And she's
Mhm.
going through all of that. Meanwhile, she's got her manager that's really sitting there waiting. Like, don't you
Mhm.
know how to speak to this woman and get to what
Yes.
she knows?
Yes.
So that scene, I think, real it certainly really resonated with me because, as you talk about sort of first generation, as you talk about, Dolores obviously being, like you said, being from Puerto Rico, and then her children here, and then how you pass along what you learn and your culture and your language. Was
Mhm.
that part of what you were hoping to get through, and scenes like that?
Yes, for sure. Because um I was thinking about language and
Yeah.
sort of the shame that comes with not being able to speak your language, the language of your home or the language of your parents, which is true. I think for a lot of folks from immigrant communities, I was doing an interview um, with a Nigerian woman from Kindred Bookstore, and she was talking about how she had similar experiences, like
Mhm.
struggling with the language and feeling this type of shame. And so, but
Mhm.
it's interesting. I think about how, because often not having the capacity to speak a certain language becomes this measure of identity and
Mhm.
how authentically you are something.
Mhm.
But loss of language, for especially for Puerto Ricans, right?
Mhm.
That's an effect of colonialism, which
Mhm.
is a very big Puerto Rican experience, so
Mhm.
it's like this strange tension that happens there, and it's not somebody like Nina's fault, that she doesn't have the capacity to language. That's the fault of colonial forces that displaced Nina's family to begin with. And that's
Mhm.
something I really wanted to think about. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been peppering you with questions. I do want to pause for a second. Number one, to see if there are other members who have questions, but also, Claire, to give you an opportunity to ask us any questions, right? If there's maybe something that you were wondering what maybe a reader's reaction might have been to certain parts of the book.
Oh, I'm interested in actually learning more about the book club, and like what were you guys reading before? What were the other multi-perspective novels that you were looking at?
Oh gosh. So we do so every month we actually choose a different book. So we are all over the place. Like next month we have a nonfiction book.
Uh,
I'd say more often than not there's some version of fiction, but it might be
yeah,
romance, it might be fantasy, mystery.
I love that.
We are literally all over the place. Our idea
Yeah.
is to sort of, find some things that maybe are a little bit outside of what we may have picked up on our own,
Yes.
but also with a touch of, having some diverse voices. So it might be, either a diverse author, or the characters, or maybe perspectives we don't hear very often. So we may,
Mhm.
some of the books we've had have been from the protagonist is a senior citizen,
Yeah.
or the protagonist is a younger child. So we try to really run the gamut as far as the types of books that we read.
Yes.
Um, so it's all over the place.
That sounds. And what was the last book that you guys read?
Oh, help me out. What did we read last month?
Was that the dragon one?
When Women
Or
Were
what?
Dragons. No, that was a month.
Oh,
That was the
it's
month before.
Megan. What's her name? Oh, I know this.
Oh, the son of the house.
Yes, The Son of the House is what we read last month. Yes, yes,
I have
yes.
to read that one. I'm gonna add it. I'm always looking for. I asked because I'm always looking for great books. So
Yes, we
I will
love
add
The
that one
Son of
to
the
my
House.
list.
Yeah, that was last
Yeah.
month. We absolutely love that. And if you go on our website, the chapter, so noechaptr.com, we've
Okay.
got we've got a blog on there where we have our sort of some of our prior books that we've had. But
Oh, that's so cool. I'm
yeah,
gonna
so each
look
month
it
we
up.
get to have sort of a little bit of a different
Yeah.
flavor.
Because
Yeah.
I think the last one that we had that swapped was Poster Boy, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
one was really good
Poster
too.
Boy, that was NJ Crosskey.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal. That
Oh,
was
I can't wait to read it.
yeah, so that one was about a child. I guess was it Deanna, was it a child? I mean, I guess it was a young teenager maybe
Uh-huh.
who
Yeah, he was a teen.
yeah, who threatens to like actually come in with an explosive and self detonate. And it goes back and talks about how it got there. And there's all these characters, and it's very, very good, very
Oh, I'm
fascinating.
gonna buy it right now. Yeah. I love a good book. And now I'm in the summer, so it's like, and
Yes.
I'm fortunate enough that they let me not teach. And so I'm like, oh,
Ah,
I'm writing and reading. And I'm like, yeah, so I love to read, and I love to read everything across genre, so I'll read a horror novel, mystery novel, anything. Um
yes, yes. We've had some really like crazy ones. We read one where like plants were coming alive. What was that one, guys?
That's what's
Help me. What was
The
this one?
ruins,
The
the horror
ruins.
book that
Yes,
we
yes,
read. Yeah.
the
yes,
ruins. Okay,
yes.
I'm gonna put that one on mine too.
We're
Is that by
literally all over the
Scott
place.
Smith?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
gonna put that one on mine too.
Yes. We did one called Wildlife,
Uh-huh.
where there was this salesman who got laid off and he decides he's going to go live in the woods voluntarily, and it becomes very feral very quickly. So that was a very good one too.
Is that the one, Finding My Purpose in an Untamed World, or is that another one?
No,
Um,
Wildlife. No, the author's name is escaping me, and I feel horribly because we
I
actually
have
spoke
it.
with him.
It was
We have
Liam
Cynthia?
Brown.
Say it
Liam
again.
Liam Brown.
Liam Brown. That's
Liam
what it is.
Brown,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, yes, and he joined, our book club to talk a little bit about it, and, it was fascinating. Like, this guy just decides, "I'm gonna just stay in the woods. I'm gonna live here, and these are gonna be my
Oh,
people," and, yeah, maybe a little bit of cannibalism, but it was so good. It was
yeah, and it looks like it was longlisted for a prize,
Yeah,
so that's really cool. I'm gonna add that one too.
yeah.
Oh, I lost your guys' tab because added all these books. Okay, there you are.
What was it?
I thought was someone speak? Monica, was that you speaking?
Yeah, sorry. What was it called again? That last book?
The last one, Wildlife we talking about Wildlife by
Wildlife.
Liam Brown?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's a pretty quick read. Wouldn't you rest of you guys agree who read it? Yeah, it's a pretty quick read, but it's also highly entertaining.
Oh, I
Okay, I'm
can't wait to read it.
happy right now.
Yes. Well, Claire, while we're talking about books, why don't we what do you read? I see you've got a bookshelf full of books behind you.
Oh, I have
What are
so
sort of
many
some of the
books.
authors that you like read for fun and or get inspiration from?
Well, right now, and I can tell you right now, I'll pull up my Kindle.
Ah.
Um, I'm reading. It's actually weird. You caught me where I'm reading like stuff that's actually not characteristic of what I usually read. But it's this author William Maxwell, "So Long, See You Tomorrow," and Willa Cather's "The Professor's House." But normally, I actually read um, a lot of Caribbean literature right now because I'm getting ready to teach Caribbean lit.
Okay.
Um, a lot of Nigerian literature. I'm reading Sefi Ata's "Everything Good Will Come," rereading that one. Somebody had sent me, recommended this book called My Mother's House,
Oh,
by this Haitian author Francesca Mamplaisir.
oh,
And so I'm excited to read that one because she said you have to read this, she said. I was like, oh, okay. But I'm also doing a rate. So as you can see, I'm going in. I just like, I have so many that I just go back and forth
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Um, and so Percival Everett's Erasure, because I was like, oh, I watched the movie. I got to
That's
read
on
the
my list
book.
too. Yes.
Ah, yeah. So that one's fun. And then I'll give you one more. Chuck Klosterman's The 90s, because,
Ah.
I'm reading about, I'm going to go back to the 90s in my second book. So I'm
Ah.
like, I was like, oh, I should like do a little bit more research about that
Yeah.
era.
Is
So
that nonfiction? That the book you're reading now, the 90s?
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
and so, but
very nice.
it's entertaining. It's like, sometimes I read nonfiction and I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
like, but he has a very good voice. He's funny, as he talks about things. So
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm happy to hear. It's interesting to see the different because I do feel like what I read, I feel like sometimes it's mood related, right? It's like what mood am I in today? What do
me
I feel
too.
like reading? So I probably have like 10 books that are just
Me too. I'm
like I've
telling you.
started and I'm like, I know I like it, but not today.
Yes, I mean, and that's better than me because I got like 30 of them, and I just like flick through them, and it's really about mood. I'm like, man, that's
Yeah.
too heavy for me right
Yeah.
now. I don't think I can do that. Like I
Yeah.
feel like my spirit feels a little crushed right now, so I need to like, maybe I need to read this like funny, like a funny romance, or maybe I'm
Yeah.
reading Samantha Irby so I could laugh, or
Yes.
and then sometimes I feel like, okay, I'm gonna get deep, and so then I'll go back to those books, and then all of a sudden I'm reading Willa Cather, like who I've never really read before, and I'm like, oh, I should probably read Willa Cather, so I'll go to it and check it out. But
Yeah.
that's
Now,
my
are you audio
confession on this book club. Don't tell people; they're gonna be like, "How's this
Are you
woman
an
teaching
audio
English?"
or do you do audiobooks? Do you like reading physical books? What's your thing?
I don't do audiobooks. I feel like I should, because I feel like I would A, get through more books, and B, um I love oral storytelling, and
Yeah.
so I'm like, "Oh, this is an opportunity." But sometimes I get turned off by audiobooks that are really overperformed, and I
Ah,
think that that's when it's like, "Hello there," he said as he sat down. "Well, what are you doing today, little one?"
yeah,
Like, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden it's like all these like weird accents, and I'm just like, I feel like it takes me out, and so, and I do love also looking at the page and seeing what
yeah,
people are doing with white space. And so, because I feel like white space also can control the rhythm, and
yeah,
it carries its own information about the story. And so, but I do want to do more. I do listen to a lot of podcasts.
yeah,
So, uh, yeah. So I know that it's not that I don't want to listen to it. It's just something about having it on the page and seeing it too that I think.
I think
yeah. That
this.
physical in the book.
Yeah.
I think the story sinks in a little bit more when I primarily listen to audiobooks. I
Mhm.
do everything and I pop them in every morning on my walks. I pop it in and I love it, but there is something about reading it just on the page or even on Kindle that the story sinks in. I feel like I
Yeah.
hear there's a little bit more. I don't know, because it's really easy to kind of daydream or your thoughts go somewhere else and then you get back into the story too. So
Yeah.
like I'm like that with like when you said you're a mood reader, I'm like that with like what modality I'm going to read. So I'm like
Ah,
sometimes into an
yes.
audiobook and I'm like, oh no, I need it in my hands. I'm going to my bookstore. I'm going to grab it. Other times I'm like, oh no, I need to do this on my Kindle, because it's a big
'Cause
beef one. And the one thing I like about Kindles is like they have such a short page. So I'm
yeah,
like getting through it so
you
quickly.
feel like you're moving,
Yeah,
Feel like you're moving, even though
Yeah.
I made like 10% or something, but
Yeah.
I love it. So
Sometimes when a book is a pretty object too, I want it in like my
oh
hand.
yeah,
Like when it's like the cover's beautiful and like the
mhm,
pages are kind of like, how they do that little rugged cut on the end. You
uh-huh,
feel like
yeah,
it's a Bible or something, like you're opening it up. I have a nice cup of coffee. Like it's all that part of that experience. Uh, yeah.
yeah.
It's too bad.
I have trouble with the audiobooks because I get easily distracted. Like
Yeah.
I'm like a cat like that where I'm like, oh, there's something over there. Oh, there's something here. And so I'm
Yeah.
listening, and then 10 minutes have gone by, and I was like, who is this character, and why
Yeah,
are
I
they killing
know.
somebody
I
right now?
know.
So I agree. I think they're great for like when I maybe like when I'm driving, for example, or I'm taking a walk and reading,
Yeah.
reading a physical book is more challenging, but I do struggle to stay to stay focused when that
Yeah.
happens.
I
Yeah.
don't know, Poster Boy was one of those ones where I actually really, really enjoyed the audiobook and
Yes.
thought they got some great narrators for it. I wish Nicole was having an easier time staying connected because she listens to a lot of the books on audio because she just gets so busy. It's the only way she can keep up with reading, and she's recommended a couple others from the books that we've read. But I agree. I listen to them to fall asleep because my mind will
Ah.
go crazy. But if I'm listening to a book, I'm either listening to that and it stays on track and I'm able to get to sleep really easy. So
Oh, wow.
But if you listen to like a really good one, are you staying awake though? Like if you're like, oh, I want to hear what's happening.
I only put it on for like 15 or 20
Ah,
minutes,
okay. Yeah,
and so I don't miss if I do fall asleep while they're talking, I don't miss
a lot.
very much of the story. And so far I haven't had to rewind too much.
Yeah. But I agree. Poster Boy was a really good one to listen to. It was very engaged. And also we read something very early on. We read this book called Anyone by Charles Soule.
Anyone.
And it's basically where you can this scientist developed this process where you can literally transplant kind of your brain and psyche and soul and
Oh,
everything
you
into a
all are
different
really
body.
reading. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow. So you
That
got
was a good
sci-fi.
audio that was a very good audio one. I thought the narrator did a really good job of going through that one. So, yeah, we're all over the map, all over the board.
I love it. I love it. I love to read that way. Yeah, now I got a
Yeah,
good bunch of good books I could add.
yeah, feel free to add them. So, I wanna jump into sort of the ending of
Mhm.
what happened to Ruthy Ramirez, because when we get to the scene where they're having, the big sort of club fight, everybody's sort of in there.
Yeah.
And um Dolores realizes this is not Ruthie, right? I
Mm,
thought it was her. So I had the thought, like throughout the book, I don't know that this is really Ruthie, right? That
mhm,
this woman on this reality series is really Ruthie. But
mhm.
I also felt like, man, it feels good to hope. It feels good to hope
Yes.
for them because, man, they've lost a lot. And wouldn't this be amazing if like this was Ruthie and it was so easy to find her? Um and it's interesting because it reminds me, I think it's a great parallel to life, right? Where sometimes you give yourself hope when maybe logically you're thinking, oh, that's probably not all that unlikely. So I
Mhm,
would love to unpack that a little bit about how you determined this was the way they were going to find out this wasn't her.
mhm.
And then what you're hoping readers take away from that.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about a when I write, and I've been trying to do this. I teach at the MFA fiction program at the University of South Carolina, and I've been trying to get my students to think about not only how a story is technically built, like I was mentioning this earlier about how like you could look at the way a story is built, like the way a table is built, right? Like, oh, it
Mhm.
has four legs, check. It's here's the top. This is a table. It works. It won't fall apart. And sometimes workshops can feel that way. Like, okay, characterization check. Like a setting check. And
Mhm.
but I wanted to push them to also think about heart and emotion, and to actually kind of track and trace the way somebody is feeling, the reader is feeling as they're reading the story. And I think that that is an incredible skill to have as a writer, to produce feelings, right?
Yeah.
And you can sort of make it so that you're controlling at every moment, whether they turn the page, whether they stop and look, whether
Mhm.
they have when they laugh, when they cry,
Mhm.
and it reminds me actually of of something, a story a good friend told me, Linda Garcia Merchant. She's older, she's in her 60s, but growing up in Chicago, she was like one of the first like woman DJs, and where she was, and that was playing music. And
Mhm.
um she had been pulled in by this guy. She was kind of hanging out by the booth, and the guy's like,
Mhm.
"Hey, you want to come?" And she's like, "No, no, no." And he said, "No, no, no,
Mm,
come." And he kind of mentored her, and
yeah.
so then he would let her spin, he would let her, play music,
Mhm.
and this was at a club, and so at one point he had pulled her. She was about to put on a song, and it was
Mhm.
at the end of the party, and the end of the night, and the guy had said to her, "No, no, no, you cannot put this song on." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "This song is going to get them too hyped, they're not going to leave." He was like, "You can't put this on." And I love that, because it makes me think about, like, they're the dancers or the audience, right? Like, and
Mhm.
controlling the emotion, right?
Mhm.
And for me, hope is what kind of dangles here,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so, as a writer, I'm kind of planting that, while they're watching it, and combining that with the emotion of the, flashing back to Ruthie,
Mhm.
where are they now, what is it, so that it's building, 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 and then bam,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so I that's what I was trying to do in terms of the reader, because I think that that's true for, how about the way that a lot of people experience grief, like you
Yeah.
said, right? Like,
Mhm.
sometimes we may illogically be looking for people who are gone in other places in our life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so I that for me was an exploration of grief.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not Ruthie, I got sometimes angry emails are like, "Why did you do that to Ruthie at the end?" And I was like, "I didn't. I'm not the murderer. I'm the writer." Like,
Yeah.
and I gotta be like, "No," But I ended it that way purposefully, because I wanted to say this is a real thing, like the epidemic of lost and disappeared Black, brown, indigenous women. This is
Mhm.
real, like,
Yeah.
and that, and and so I wanted to highlight that, for
Mhm.
so people are more aware, of how these women and young girls are vulnerable, and
Mhm.
um yeah.
Yeah. So was Ruthie always going was this always gonna be the ending for Ruthie, or did you ever play around with maybe there's some other, sort of endings? Was it always that she was not gonna live, or
I always knew that that was the ending for Ruth, and when
Yeah.
I sort of, like, as I was writing the novel, and because people, as you workshop, people kind of test it out, like, "Oh, okay, well, what if it's not?" You kind of
Yeah.
play that out in your mind, like,
Yeah.
"Well, what if it's not?" And then I would follow that, but it always came back to, no, this was her end, right? And
Yeah.
that's what made sense for this story and this novel. But there's that I was reading this really fascinating article about this
Mhm.
young girl who disappeared, right?
Mhm.
And all these years later, they found her,
Oh,
and she
wow.
was like, it's I think she was not Latina, but she now spoke Spanish or something like
Oh, wow.
this or whatever, and
Wow.
um but anyway, but I think that's a fascinating story too, because it's
Yeah.
like, why leave, right?
Yeah.
And what is the gap between the stories of the family who miss her and are looking for her, and this young woman who decided to leave, but
Yeah.
and as fascinating and as wonderful as that story is, it wasn't the story of this novel, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really,
Understood. I'm
I
sorry,
really
did I hear somebody speak up?
sorry, yeah, that's me again.
Hi.
I really liked how you left a lot of possibilities throughout the book. I felt like
Mhm.
I was always thinking, oh, she could have left based on some
yeah.
information you gave us, right? Like kind of the tension between her friend and the tension with her and her mom and
No,
things
yeah,
like that, and then there was, oh, but no, she could have been taken because she went to a different bus stop. It was
yeah,
like always, it just kept, oh, you always kept like wondering, and I think it also linked back to that hope where you're like, oh, but I hope it was this, like I hope
yeah.
she just ran away and she's still alive. So when I did get to the end of the book and I saw, that she did get taken, I was like, oh my God. I was like, sorry. I was
I'm
like,
sorry. I'm sorry, Monica. I'm sorry.
I was literally like, so I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt it, but that's what I loved about reading, is it gives you that kind of visceral reaction where you're just like, you feel all the emotion. And I was like so heartbroken for the family. And I'm like, oh my God. But then I love that you added that, they did eventually find at least her body. And then I felt relief, and I was like, okay. I gotta go to get some therapy right now.
Yeah.
But
You know,
it
and
was really
I
great.
wanted to have that moment too where Ruthie's talking back to them, right? Like there's this it's the go where she's like, I want you to know this. I see you. You know, I did. You know, and the chapter right before, for me, that where there is still hope is as they're putting the baby to bed, right? Like, Jessica says, no, she's not laughing, she's crying, which for me was also symbolic of, the tension between this family who at times sometimes laughs things off, right? But
Mhm.
it's actually there is that emotion. And as they go upstairs, they all circle her and they say, it's okay, baby
Mhm.
girl, you are loved, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
And that's the last words of that chapter. And for
Mhm.
and for me, that's the hope, right? Like the
Mhm.
next generation, the way we raise young girls afterwards, the way we tell them that they're loved, right? Like that to
Mhm.
me is it.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. I really appreciated, I think, all the emotions, that it brought out, because that's what you like. It's like to be able to be very invested or involved in a story, that you're feeling it. So yeah, it was very beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I definitely had to put the book down when I got to, I don't know, it was like right before the last page and it says, this is where the story ends for Ruth. And I was
No.
like, no! But I think you're right. I mean, I think I always knew sort of reading instinctively, like this is probably how it needs to end, right? It just feels like that is the way, right, that the story should end. But I do, like you said, how you sort of wrapped it up and said, hey, there's hope. There's at least the family got closure. We had a really good story on the way to get there. So
Yeah, thank
excellent.
you.
Well, Claire, before we jump for the day, I'd love to hear what's up next for you. I thought I heard you say something about writing another novel.
Yes, I am definitely writing another novel, which I'm so excited about. You know, uh, uh, which also has, difficulties as I'm navigating it, but like I just I got the chance to not teach and actually write, and hopefully we get my son in daycare. I'm like,
That could
that'll
improve the
be a
writing
game
process,
changer.
right?
That's people are like, "What is your writing process?" I'm like, "Daycare would be nice," you know. Um, yeah, so that's what I'm hoping on, and that one's going to be about motherhood. It's going to be about the '90s. It's going to be back in Staten Island. It'll have some mystery elements to that, but I'm really thinking about motherhood and mother-daughter relationships, and
Mhm.
so I'm excited. Please light a candle for me, y'all, that I finish it this summer. I really want to finish
Yes,
it. So
yes. You will. You will. We have hope because we need to read it. So
I would hope, and if you guys read it, I'm always happy to come back here. It
oh,
will be in another 2 to 3 years, so hopefully I'll be more rested by then.
you'll be in a whole different phase of motherhood, I'm sure. Then, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Claire, thank you again so much. If
Thank
we ever
you.
all have our books, we'll just take a quick. I like to do a quick photograph if we all have our books before
I don't know
we.
if I have it. Let me see. Oh, I have this. I have the Spanish version. There we go. There you
Oh
go.
yes, 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 yes. All right, let's do it. There we go. Excellent. Well, again, thanks everybody for hanging out with us today. It was such a pleasure to have you, Claire. I appreciate you taking time out of your day, particularly since you've got a
Thank you.
toddler who is, I'm sure, like, pay attention to me. Look at me. I don't want to take a nap. I'm not tired. So,
Exactly. That's exactly. I'm going to him right now. So
yes, thank you so much. Next month, we are reading The Pale-Faced Lie by David Crow, and David will be joining us for our book club. Until we chat again, everybody enjoy the rest of your Sundays. Bye bye.
bye, guys. Take care. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I don't know how to leave though. Let's see.